Hello, everybody.
Yeah, later that same day.
We've had a break.
We're going to continue talking about the churches of Jože Plečnik.
This is about buildings and cities.
I'm Luke Jones.
I'm George Ginchel.
It's a nice sunny afternoon where we are.
We have an amazing, misty and evocative image.
Yeah, you were just saying it looks like Tarkovsky's Nostalgia, which is
that the right film?
Nostalgia. Very misty.
It is, and they're going to a church.
Yeah.
It looks a beautiful painting.
Yeah, one of the things we were discussing off mic was that some of the books about Plečnik sometimes seem to sort of be laundering the weirder decisions that he's made and trying to make them rational. I think our take is that there is like an unavoidable kernel of weirdness in the Plečnik oeuvre, which
because that's what he liked or was drawn to.
Which is very much on display at the building we're going to talk about next. So we're looking at a picture I took when I was visiting in November of the Church of St. Michael, which is again a suburban church. In this case, the city never really arrived there. It's sort of between a couple of villages, and it's kind of just outside of the sort of ring road on the southern side of Ljubljana. When we were there, it would be very misty in the mornings. Every morning would be very, very misty, very atmospheric. I think that it gets a kind of... it's surrounded by mountains, so I think it gets that sort of inversion where it fills up with fog. And, you see this very strange silhouette emerging out of the mist as you walk along the road. This was a classic architecture field trip death march through trying to go over a bridge which was closed for works and then having to go through a weird tunnel instead. It was all
what did the students make of it?
Oh, they were into it, yeah.
They were into
it, yeah.
What year were they?
Second and third.
Second, third years.
This degree students, yeah.
What did they think about Plečnik?
Well, they're still thinking about him because he seems to be featuring in quite a lot of people's projects as an influence. I don't really know.
That's interesting because I went in fifth year.
Yeah.
We went there and we went around Switzerland. And I would say nobody took up the Plečnik...
The invitation.
Invitation.
Of
Some people were quite
architecture.
Into it. And there was absolutely the possibility. I mean, there was a lot of sort of historicist, modernist fusion going on.
All you got to do is put a column in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Put a column in the middle of the window.
One somewhere else as well.
Yeah, standing on its own little. I mean, this is really quite a magical silhouette. It has a strange, from the side, a very strange thin tower. This sort of bridge of dreams that kind of goes up over a series of arches up from the ground with a kind of handrail made of little stumpy miniature columns, but not joined together. And then the body of the church itself is a very, very simple sort of barn-like form with a shallow pitched roof. And yeah, it is another of these kind of weird type form fusion mashups with a very unconventional plan layout. It's another very wide one. In this case, super wide. It's sort of more than 2.5, maybe it's like 2.5 times as wide as it is deep or something like that, with the altar in the middle. So it feels like the proportions feel like those of a church that should be going the other way, especially because it does actually have sort of columns and the sort of suggestion of a nave and aisle kind of going the other way. And it means that the altar and then this little sort of enclosure in front of the altar almost bridges all the way across the middle of it. It's got these two little islands for the congregation on either side of the wide plan.
Oddly, are in pews which essentially just face the wall.
I don't know where to start really. I've probably got some kind of info. This is a little bit later. It got going in the mid-30s. Basically, there was a bequest. There were plans going around for a bit longer, but there was someone left some money in the mid-30s, which got it going. The impression that you get of something which is quite kind of rough and ready, quite rustic, I think is somewhat faithful to the actual experience of building it, where I think there was quite a lot of bricolage, quite a lot of donated materials. And also, it seems to have been a bit of a faff getting things built in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia because there were politics between the regions and the Ministry of Housing or Construction or whatever it was in Belgrade, and so I think
I
there
also
was.
think that the different denominations and religions had some political fractiousness as they
Yes,
continue to.
there seems to have been a bit of like ducking and diving, and sometimes classifying things as temporary, which were actually permanent, and this kind of thing to kind of fiddle the system. But yeah, I don't know. I think we can.
Should we
try and describe it? Yeah, it's.
So
you go.
The body of it is made of rough masonry. So the masonry's been squared, but it isn't. It's kind of stones that are just cut against each other, with some little patches of brick for tidying things up. There is a main body which has got a low pitched roof, and got masonry corners, and then the main body is a sort of timber infill with a column, which I think is made of concrete, in the middle, dividing in half, which leads to a slightly modern and slightly sort of barn-like.
Yeah, barn or like ski chalet, isn't it?
Something like that, but refined and particular, sort of idiosyncratic. Feels like it could have been done later. And then the big addition to that is this belfry with exposed bells, which is narrow and a bit wide and very tall. So it's perhaps a fifth of the width on the long side of the body of the church, and then perhaps as tall as the church is wide, maybe.
Yeah.
And then maybe 1/4 of its depth. Its depth is a quarter of its width. And then coming up to that is this bridge, which is the entrance to the church, which has got 3 arches. It feels like one half of a kind of bridge you might get crossing a rural river. And the bridge is the staircase going up into the church, and that's got balustrades, but not really a functional balustrade, made of little stumpy columns with nothing connecting them. So the edge of the staircase just falls off the edge. There's nothing to stop you going off.
And it's just fields all around the side of it as well.
And it stands in fields, and that's quite interesting. It has a sort of strange relationship. You'd almost expect to go in and then rotate round.
Yeah.
And you do in the Balkans get a lot of the old churches have got a kind of porch on the side.
Yeah.
And then you go in at the side, and then the church is conventionally orientated, but not in this case. And the interior is very wide. It doesn't feel as low here, and there are very, very thin wooden columns in the middle, and then there are 4 large. Is it just 4?
Yeah, there's
in the freestanding
4
large.
freestanding and 4 in the facade, so they're like in pairs.
And they're large cylindrical concrete columns, which are actually sections of sewer pipe which have been fused together and then polished and then painted in a slightly folksy or early Christian or Romanesque pattern.
Yeah.
It's a bit like some sort of big Romanesque columns, but they're just drums and they go straight down. And then the timber, the rest of it is quite timber-lined. It's got a timber beamed roof with these very thin columns, and there's quite a bit of sort of slightly folksy, but the reason I'm saying folksy, not folk, is because it doesn't. It's kind of nodding in that direction, but I think it actually might be kind of idiosyncratic as well. I don't think it's like archaeological.
The vibe is definitely like slightly Balkan kind of kitsch, slightly like Slavic sort of Russian doll, painted wooden object, clog kind of.
You've got a picture of a lamp made out of a bull's horn.
Yeah. Yeah, and this it's like a kind of interwoven baskety sort of motif, and the colours are bright red, bright green, sort of bright, sort of sky blue. It's very, very maypole kind of colours.
And the pitch of the roof, the building's wide, and the pitch goes along its length, so it really is quite like it's been turned round.
Yeah,
and there's almost 2 squares of seating with a big gap between them.
Yeah.
And at the head of that gap is the altar, which is an unusual arrangement.
Yeah, it's very furniture-y. It feels very kind of boaty or very like... I guess it does. It feels like one of those sort of rural vernacular wooden churches or something where everything is very wood and you're really surrounded by wood and there's wall painting and these sorts of things. It's actually in a very idiosyncratic way with these funny material flourishes and things.
The sort of columns feel almost Romanesque.
Yeah.
And they are actually concrete sewer pipes.
Yeah, polished and then painted in. Yeah, I would say it's a kind of Romanesque. It's also, at first, I thought it was kind of folk art, basket work kind of motif or something.
Yeah.
But very, very jolly colours.
What did you make of it? Because I haven't been to this one either.
It's a powerful meeting of kind of atmospheres. I sort of walked into it and I thought, wow, this feels like a kind of mountain refuge or something. That was the sort of immediate impression without looking at it in detail, this thing of being surrounded by lots and lots of quite sort of straightforward light wood joinery. And then you look a bit more and it's like, these very thin wooden columns which run down the middle of the space, and they sort of sit in the middle of all of the kind of bays, which are, they're kind of about 4x4 inch like column, but going right up to the ceiling. And then they've got these little sort of exaggerated sort of corbelling motif at the top, which feels again, like kind of Eastern vernacular type of look, like something that you might see on a Romanian church or something like that. The interior is this sort of very powerfully Plečniky. It's like a mixture of flavours and conventions and sort of visual codes and languages and things, which was totally unfamiliar to me and which was powerfully memorable. The St. Francis Church is like kind of amazing. It's kind of a bit alienating, but it's also kind of amazing, and it sort of stimulates the imagination. Whereas this one I think is rather touching and like does really have a very villagey feel to it. Everything's very beautifully kept. Everything's very beautifully crafted. Yeah, you do feel like this is really trying to symbolise and a kind of valorise like a sort of a rural community and the kind of the virtues of like a sort of traditional rural community pulling together and crafting and building this sort of celebration of their collective identity and faith and things like that. But one of the things
which is interesting because in many ways it's very deliberately modern.
Yeah.
It isn't just that it's got these big concrete columns, but also the exterior, in one sense, it feels like something you could find in Italy.
Yeah.
Or a little bit folksy, but it also feels quite like something that exists in like you've taken the arts and crafts mentality and then pushed it further into modernism, early bits of modernism.
Some moments on it evoke like later architects doing a version of Frank Lloyd Wright or something like that. You get quite a lot of like 60s, not terribly with it, commercial architecture, but which is sort of evoking Lloyd Wright in his sort of Taliesin West period or whatever. I think one thing we should say is that the church is on the first floor of the building. So it's got 2 floors, but this bridge takes you up and you enter into the first floor. At the ground floor, which I didn't see, I think is, again, the priest has a house there, and I think there's probably also some other stuff.
It's interesting. What do you think, with all the Plečnik buildings, he's infusing historic, or combining together images from folk culture and particularly history and particularly a kind of antique history. I think he uses things from all historic periods.
Yeah.
But I think his core period is, if I was going to date him, he's somewhere like between 350 and 600 AD.
Yes, okay.
In terms of his sort of early Christian,
classical
Italian. And then there's lots of different infusions into that. And it's a kind of version of that that's very abstract. And then there's sort of flaunting of modernity and modern construction technology, as well as getting the stuff done. He's very inclined to... He's not at all worried about propriety. He's very happy to mix very expensive things and cheap things. It creates things that are, I think, at least for him, contemporary. These all feel quite contemporary. He's not just pretending to be classical, It's actually doing stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a very strange time or notion of... What do you think it's about?
Well, yeah, I
could posit a few things. Like, I don't think you can separate him from his Christianity, and you can see how an appeal to the past makes sense for Christianity. Christianity comes out of a particular sort of time, and there's a heroic relationship with early Christians. But I don't think it's that simple.
There are some things about it which are clearly performative, but they're also real. Like the bridge going up and the tower are designed in a way where they're like nature as scenography is sort of undeniable. They're like so theatrical. The tower is literally like a flat stage set, a sort of interpretation of maybe a theme from an Italian campanile or something, like sort of something like that. But it's so theatrical, but it is also real and deeply felt, and the fact that it's kind of like its performative nature is actually sort of, it's both kind of acknowledged but also kind of the point. Like, yeah, that's what a monument does, is it's meant to symbolize something, and it's like it's sort of fulfilling its role by kind of standing there symbolizing. It's okay that it's scenographic. I don't know. I think that, yeah, like a lot of things, he's very good at seeing the opportunities of like bricolage and getting things done, being able to synthesize those things into something that feels very, very sort of integrated and very worked out. You know, like this is a building made with lots of donated wood. The sewer pipes they got, I think, for free because they had more of them than they needed on a nearby infrastructure project. Yeah, like lots of donated labour, I think, as well. I mean, it's extremely kind of unique, sort of sui generis like thing that he comes up with, but none of it feels like, well, that doesn't really fit. You know, it's very, very like convincingly comes together as something. There's some lovely touches in the joinery as well. There's some lovely harking back to his roots in furniture making. There are these little joinery motifs which you get quite a lot of. This little, I don't know what the word is for that, this sort of little knobbly
corners of the pews. So it's a pew, you know, with a shelf at the back for a prayer book, and are turned, and it's not like a candy comb. It's like a candy comb if you didn't offset it, you know, just sort of wiggles in and out, but in a quite attractive way.
I don't know if I got a picture of it, but there's also a lot of there's this like motif of a protruding dovetail, which you get lots and lots, like a sort of a dovetail where the ends are slightly oversailing, which is used a lot I think in some of the joinery around the altar and that kind of thing. Seems to be something that he likes.
I mean, it seems quite attractive and convincing, this one.
Yeah.
It's strange that it's so wide. Feels like it'd be a bit strange for doing a service in this.
Be good for a wedding. You could really play up the like his and hers sides, couldn't you? Because they're literally separated by the altar, and also there's a space occupied when the priest kind of comes down off the altar, when the sort of pulpit for doing a reading is at the front, and there's this almost sort of like wooden bathtub around the whole kind of sacred precinct in the middle. So you're literally kind of walled off from the other side. It's just, yeah.
Some of the seats have got a very obstructed view of the altar.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't have a view of the altar at all, actually. You completely can't see it.
Yeah.
But it's a good church, isn't it?
It is good, isn't it? It's very nice. Yes. Thanks a lot to the local priest, whose name I've forgotten, for letting us in to have a look at it. It was much appreciated. Should we do the next one?
Yeah. I mean, that one it feels nice and different.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go on.
Yeah. So this one, neither of us have been to.
Properly strange.
And also not that easy to get good photos of. So the Church of St. Anthony of Padua in Belgrade. This was built... So St. Anthony of Padua in Belgrade was built... a number of these were built for the Franciscans. I mean, St. Francis, I think, was built for the Franciscans, and this one also built for the Franciscans in the kind of starting from the late 1920s. Apparently, the head of the order in Belgrade went to see Plečnik, and he refused to do the job. So he lay down across his front door until he changed his mind.
Wow. I would imagine that would appeal to Plečnik.
Yeah. I think he liked sort of turning things down.
Yeah.
I think it was all part of the mythos of the master. He says no to nearly everything, and then...
Well, okay, so what is this church? From the outside, firstly, it's round, so it's like a big drum.
We've got a new format.
It's
round.
brick.
Yeah.
It's got a high clarity of windows, and then the lower part of the main body hasn't got any windows. So the only windows of the main body are around. From that drum, there is another completely bare brick drum, a smaller one.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, two. One of which is the apse.
Yeah.
And then there's a tall brick drum tower, which has got lots of little windows in it.
Yeah.
And it feels a bit like a lighthouse or something like that.
Yeah.
And then on the front, there is a portico, I think. In the drawings, it looks more like it looks more conventionally churchy, but in photographs, it's very much curious in the round.
So the kind of clerestory sort of strip is, a bit like the Prague church. The proportions of the drum from the outside are literally gasometer, like that's.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's literally like sort of gasometer proportions, and with this then very, very shallow roof on top of it. Yeah, quite unique interpretation of the type. And then
another one with a big tower. He likes this big, prominent towers.
Yeah, and it looks quite amazing on the inside. It's got, as you say, no windows low down, and then lit by this very big, these are high up windows up in the drum. And it has, I think, either one or two very high up galleries, sort of gallery stories. Are there two? Yeah, there are two.
I think there's two. There's a gallery and then there's a gallery in the clerestory.
They seem much too high up to have any kind of function in the service.
Well, galleries generally, like the Triforium galleries, aren't really used in a service either. I think they're there for... Plečnik churches have an awful lot. They have got quite a lot of accommodation, and then they've got a lot about monumentality.
Yeah.
All of the churches that we've seen devote a lot of the church to monumental effect. Even the one we just saw, which is much more rustic, they have large, prominent towers. They divide up the space and create a lot of space, which is about kind of magnifying the church experience. And I think the interior, it feels like an early, a way in which it feels like a bit like an early Christian church, is that the interior is made of these big vaults.
Yeah.
So the plan, if you can imagine, there's a big zone of the plan.
Yeah.
It's a circle, and then it's like lots of side chapels. Cut out of it, but there's a big depth. Which is functionally the sort of wall or vaults or little side chapel axes, and that does feel like I don't know, what's the cathedral in Ravenna called, the very early one, which has got isn't really like that, but it's got these feeling of something round with things coming off the sides of it.
It feels also a bit like kind of like abandoned Roman baths or whatever. The sort of massiveness, the massiveness and blankness of the masonry. Although it's also got things which cut against it. I mean, this one has a lot of concrete on display. The gallery can really only be made of concrete, the way that it's spanning, and it's very kind of... I think the lower bit is painted, but the upper bits are just sort of plain grey Portland by the look of it.
And the interior's got that massive central plan, a bit like the Pisa Baptistry or something, like this big circular building.
It looks super atmospheric. I would love to see this one. It looks very big and silent and monumental. I mean, obviously, round churches are obviously a feature of early Christianity, and we talked about Santa Stefano Rotonda in Rome in the first
not
episode.
Actually very many of them.
No, but they're one of the forms that they adopt.
Yeah.
The sort of round tomb form, and there's the kind of long basilica form. Yeah, I know it's a bit hackneyed. Like, this is like real kind of parallel universe building for me. It's like, I can see that this is a big religious building, and it's got lots of bits which are sort of coded in one way or another, but it also just is so unlike anything else I've seen, and it's this like really, really high circular space.
Yeah, I mean, I find that his churches in general are super successful about creating some monumental atmosphere, which can have varying degrees of oppressiveness and uncanniness. They don't ever feel like they're really designed around celebration of the mass or something like that.
It's nice, this we're looking at a photo of what I guess is the stair coming up, this kind of spiral stair. It looks like all of the details of the handrail of the gallery are this like fine polished terrazzo that he uses in various places with like a little white grain.
Yeah, they're not frightened of labour in this.
Yes, labour is not the problem. Okay, so we could talk about a major work, and I think this will be the end of the episode after this one. So the big cemetery for Ljubljana is to the north. I think it's called Žale, like a kind of pre-existing cemetery, but...
There's a very large cemetery, and at the front of it, there's a kind of grand entrance, and then there's a compound in which there are a number of chapels, essentially, of different sizes. There's a kind of main chapel, which isn't that huge. And then there's a war memorial, cenotaph, and a series of small chapels. And they're laid out in a kind of complex. It's very unusual. It's got some axial symmetry, so you look through a big portal arch to the main chapel. And then there are a series which are very enigmatic objects, kind of almost like stupa dome. There's one which is kind of like a box made of urns. There's some very, very small temple with a column in the middle. The main one has a column in the middle. And they're in a kind of park, like a kind of...
Yeah.
It's like a theme park of chapels of the dead.
Yeah.
Something like that. You know, you move around. They're not scattered irrationally, but it feels like something which was built up over a long time, even though it wasn't.
Yeah.
Some of the chapels are very, very small.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, I don't know, something like the Acropolis or something like this set of different temples. But some are like really diminutive, like maybe 4 people could stand inside. And there's a couple which are bigger. I think the main one's the one which has got all the urns. The side walls are made all of urns. It's a very curious, kind of haunted place.
The chronology is, this is a kind of late 30s project. Yeah. And it seems to be a bit of a theme of him being drafted in as a kind of hero consultant or something. Essentially, someone else had done the plans for this, and then they were unpopular. Yeah. So they drafted him in to do it instead. So it was built from in the late 1930s. Some of the graves I feel like are older than this. So it's kind of to the north of this, there's a whole big district of lots and lots and lots of graves laid out. I mean, I might be completely wrong about that. Maybe that. But the lots and lots and lots of graves over a kind of a big precinct. And then even beyond that, there's a big, rather amazing addition to it, which was built in it looks like in the sort of 60s, 70s, in very kind of Yugo modernist sort of utopian style. Quite an extraordinary bit of work as well. And then, this is sort of the urban face of the cemetery, although it's still quite a sort of suburban location. This is the main ceremonial area, and it's the sort of the proper kind of public bit of the cemetery rather than the expansive terrain where all the actual people are. And I think it's got some chapels for celebrating different things. It's got chapels dedicated to all sorts of different people and saints. And it's also got, I think originally like a workshop or something. I think there's like a workshop for possibly tombs, graves, coffins, something like that, carpenters. It's all of these tiny little buildings scattered in... I thought of the Acropolis, like the way that they're laid out is... It has a sort of logic, which is a kind of logic of movement and experience and scenography and kind of discovery, but it's definitely not on... it's not on any kind of grid or anything like that. Yeah. Except with the one exception of the entrance.
Yeah,
which is
this big, grand
kind of...
It's got 2 wings. It's not quite... It's sort of tapering out away from you. A lot of the chapels actually have a kind of central plan or a central column on the facade. They feel like those little treasuries at Delphi or something like that, where they're these tiny little classical boxes. It's white. Everything is kind of white and pale grey. And there are these column, I think, lamps.
Yeah, a lot of artificial stone. This I take to be the sort of national ceremonial bit or something. It's got flags.
Yep.
It's got a kind of pulpit. I think this is where you can do your sort of state funerals and things.
It's a kind of 4-columned outdoor pergola type thing.
And then the chapel behind, it has a big column in the middle, which is obscuring the actual door into the kind of temple behind it. Yeah, maybe we should go back to the beginning, because there's a lot of strange and interesting things going on.
There's a lot of different objects. The objects are quite curious. What's the stupa?
Yeah, the stupa is... So there's one which is a kind of stupa form made of super rough stone. Most of these were closed when I was there, so I don't know really what a lot of them are like inside. The chapels are all meant to be dedicated to different saints, so you've got your pick of 20 or so of them.
Are there that many?
I don't know. And
they tend to be like little temples.
So we've got St. Ahak,
which is this beehive stupa thing, with seemingly not much by way of apertures.
Yeah. Next to it, we've got presumably this one, St. John, which is a quite conventional little 3-column temple. We've got the double chapel of St. James and St. Mary, which is behind it, which has got kind of 2 entrances either end and a little lantern in the middle. We've got the chapel of St. Peter, which is a little octagonal one, sort of in the round.
Well, these are all, by the way, very small chapels. So St. Peter's is interesting. It's a octagonal. It's got one way in, and then it's kind of like a dovecote with little...
Yeah, it's like a dovecote bandstand kind of fusion.
Got a little bronze dome roof.
Yeah, we've got St. Peter, St. Nicholas, St. Andrew, St. Francis, another double chapel, St. Joseph and St. Anthony, and there's the chapel of Adam and Eve, and then there's a double chapel of St. George and St. Cyril and Methodius, which feels like it should be a triple chapel.
And they're mainly these very small... It's difficult to know what you do in them. Like, they look amazing from the outside.
Yeah.
We did go in a few of them, but they're big enough for... They've often got a place for a coffin.
Yeah.
And they're big enough for 4 or 6 people to stand around that coffin.
Yeah.
All of whom could... almost like if you had people carrying a coffin, you could just about fit enough people in...
To carry the coffin back out.
To carry the coffin in and coffin out. But only that. It's a set of buildings with these close kind of visual connections. Is that the inside of the... So the inside of the sort of beehive stupa one is all bricks.
Lined in brick, yeah.
Beehive.
It's kind of brick igloo. St. Ahak, the patron saint of Carniola. So this was the kind of stone tumulus was originally covered in grass, but that has fallen off over time. Not a great expert in green walling technology.
He tried to do a few, so the pyramid in the Roman wall.
His little Roman pyramid also was covered in grass.
And then it didn't stay. So that's an image for him, a sort of rustic image.
Yeah.
And there's various things made with lots of urns, stone urns in the walls. The octagonal one has the kind of dovecote bit at the top is kind of made of urns.
Yeah.
And then the sides of the main chapel have got lots of urns. And there's lots of enigmatic columns everywhere. It's like a sort of landscape of his symbolic-y. I expect you could get to some degree of interpreting the nature of the designs with the nature of the saints. But I think probably mainly it's a kind of architectural set of juxtapositions. And it's cold and crisp and quite pleasurable to have these kind of relationships.
What's the deal with St. Cyril and Methodius? Is that one person? Why have they got...
No, it's 2 people. They're the apostles of the Slavs.
Yeah, I thought they were 2 people.
We're calling him Cyril, but I think you'd probably call him Kirill.
Kirill, yeah. So it should be a triple chapel if it's George, Cyril and Methodius. But I guess Cyril and Methodius are always together.
Yeah.
They're a unit. Yeah, there's a sort of strange rose window made of balustrading elements.
Do you think this is all artificial stone, or do you think
I think it's artificial stone.
Yeah.
It's polished concrete.
Quite memorable, quite unusual thing. The workshops are nice as well. They've got a nice kind of mosaic-y walls.
Yeah, the workshop has got this sort of big oversailing roof, and then these little panels of lovely brickwork with kind of mosaic on the top. A nice kind of rubble and stone walling. It's
really nice that they got this done. It all feels quite decorative. It's definitely more impressive. People get very excited by the big Victorian cemeteries in London, but this is far more...
There's so much in it.
Yeah. The only thing I can compare it to, the Rossi Cemetery in Mantua and Mihaela Scarpa, Brion Vega, sorry.
Yeah, it's a bit more like Scarpa, isn't it? Because it's got
more
so,
like Scarpa.
It's got it's got so many elements, and it's
But
got
it
so
isn't-
it's a
The way
it's
in
a
which
whole
it
kind
isn't
of
is it's small. It's like a little thing off the side made of little tiny chapels, whereas the Rossi is this very big compound, which is actually the graveyard. This isn't. It's like you took a few of the sort of family chapels, but they aren't. It's hard to know. The chapels feel like they should be. They feel more like what they are is family tombs, but they're not. They're little tiny chapels. Apart from as a kind of beautiful architectural monument, it's a bit hard to see what it's all for, other than decorating in a really attractive and interesting way the way into the cemetery. A real oddity. Because you couldn't have a funeral in them, for example, which you would... It feels like it's almost like you take a coffin and you put it in these things, and it builds up some spiritual power or something.
Apparently, originally the plan was that they would have a kind of entrance for the cemetery, and they'd have a morgue to keep the dead people in.
Yep.
And then you would take them out the morgue into, and go and have your funeral. But instead, he persuaded them to have all of these chapels.
You get to do a load of pavilions.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you do. I guess you do go and have a little mini service or something.
But I mean, I'm not exaggerating saying I think a lot of them you could not physically fit more than 6 people in.
Well, it's absolute feast of like idiosyncratic vocab, isn't it?
I mean, I can see why he loved designing it. It's like design a whole load of little temples, which can be very
kind of
different to
central
each other.
prayer chapel with all of the urns. It's like Connect 4, but all of the holes are filled with urns.
Yeah.
It's kind of, the urns become a kind of long spindly column in these window spaces. It sort of has the uncanny feeling of a sort of stage set or something, or like Port Merion or something.
Yeah.
It's got that kind of feeling about it. That's
It feels like it's like a set of something that exists for something. Okay, so you go on a pilgrimage and you pray at all these different shrines to all the different, like the martyr tombs that were in the Colosseum or something.
Yeah.
Or to all the different people who had been martyred, fed to the lions.
Yeah, but we've kind of brought it all into the...
But it's synthetic. It's made up. The actual religion, I don't think quite exists. It feels very symbolic, but what the symbol is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, at some level, I'm sure like there's some connection between the attributes of the saint and the shape of the chapel.
Yeah.
But why they're there, and what they're for...
I mean, what they remind me of is John Haydock's kind of paper architecture projects from the sort of 80s, where he produces these things called architectural masks with a Q, which are modelled on a kind of fun fair with lots and lots of little architectural characters sort of disposed around a site, and they're characters playing out some sort of play which is about kind of deep buried historical trauma or whatever. There are moments where like Plečnik feels a bit like postmodernist Monkey. He feels like he's sort of way out of his time, or he's kind of playing straight something which a lot of people would do with a very conscious sense of performativity. Something about that's rather amazing.
Yeah, he's very good at it.
Yeah.
It's very successful in its own terms, but it's weird exercise in imagined history.
It kind of makes me think that's kind of okay. Like, I think maybe imagined history is good.
Well, the whole thing is a bit... Slovenia is not... I mean, it was a very important area in the Roman Empire, but not in its own terms. It's close to Italy, but it isn't Italy.
Yeah.
It's definitely Catholic, but it doesn't have like loads of classical chapels of martyred saints, actually, I don't think. I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
So there is some of that, but it's not quite... The history he's calling into being isn't quite something that was really there. It's like he imagined that the Slovenians were Etruscans, and and he's kind of imagining that it's part of classical civilization in a way that obviously time has gone on for the same amount of time everywhere, but it isn't Italy.
Yeah.
They're not Romans or Etruscans, but it is a very proud, and it's doing itself a lot of justice with these buildings.
Yeah.
But he's kind of like conjuring into existence antiquity.
Yeah. I think it's kind of okay as well.
Imagined archaeology.
Yeah. I like the imagined archaeology. Lots and lots of places would do something a lot more middle of the road than this.
Well, the reason that it's okay is because he's really good at it.
He's really good, and he is trying to do something distinctive and
I think
with a real flavour.
And I think step one is for him to sort of believe it. Like, don't question it.
He has to believe his own sort of mythology.
He has to kind of make this thing up where he's a mystic master and everyone's got to prostrate themselves before him, and he says no 3 times, and then he says yes.
Yeah, lie across the
store. And he says, you don't need a morgue. What you need is a imaginary landscape.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he got them to build it.
Yeah. There's also further off
cenotaph.
There's also a cenotaph for it's an ossuary, I think, for the dead of the First World War. It's not super accessible, but it's a kind of another iteration of this sort of drum chapel idea.
Interesting politically, isn't it? Given that it was in a country, two bits of which were fighting each other in that war, and the bit that it's in was on the losing side.
Yes, better not to think about it too much. I think.
Yeah.
It's, it's another kind
Incredibly bloody, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in the city episodes we can talk a little bit more about the political context, but yeah, there's a lot of politics going on, even before you actually get to the Second World War itself. There's an awful lot of stuff going on. But yeah, it's the kind of drum chapel motif married to a kind of another version of this like sort of magical bridge idea.
It's all in stone, so it feels a bit like, I don't know, the Tomb of Theodoric or something, or a little bit like the Battle of Nations monument, but much shorter.
And then it's got, again, a kind of version of this, like, I don't know why he loves this balustrade without a top on.
Yeah.
He has done it again. Not very clear in the photos, but with the slightly larger bollards, yes. And then it's got this clear story strip. The method of taking a photo of the inside is you have to stick your phone right through a very small hole in the metal door. So slightly luck of the draw. What kind of? So I can't say anything about what the interior is really like.
So
but
there's a column down the middle.
Yeah, column down the middle. You come in at first floor level, and then it's below you again. There's this kind of space. There's a sort of lower level where I guess
the bones are.
Yeah,
I think that's enough.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is the Plečnik church? What's he doing? What's it about?
He's got various things which he's really, really good at. Like, he's really good at planning, and he's able to... Every single one of his churches, I guess except for maybe... The Prague one, in the end, has like a very pragmatic plan. But all of the others have something quite fascinating and unusual going on in the plan, which he manages to synthesize and kind of harmonize with the building as a whole quite effectively. They're all very historicist, but they're nearly all built with quite kind of contemporary materials, often in a quite unashamed way. Lots of brick, lots of concrete, and I guess the white render is the most kind of proper of his, and stone as well.
And not just new materials, but actually even the design and the massing is all quite modern, really. Yeah. It's not just the way it's built that's in part of its own economy. It's there's a lot of stripping stuff back and reimagining the shapes. It's very I would say of its time, except it's really very of about 30 years earlier.
Yeah,
it feels like it's all sort of from the 1890s. Or like something that would be the cutting edge around the turn of the century.
Yeah, there's sort of things about it which feel, like a version of the arts and crafts or something.
If he was doing it at the same time that Otto Wagner was working, if he was in that generation, it would be of its time. It feels like it's sort of still of its time, but slightly, like you occasionally get a band and they're like 20 years too late.
Yes.
But they're still like really good at it. Partly because they've kind of heard what everyone else has done.
Yeah.
He kind of already knows what it all looks like.
They're impressive, the buildings, and they're
all very monumental.
It's like a big theme in architectural history, or maybe the history of art generally, that people are like, everything goes wrong when people develop a sort of self-consciousness about things, and they can no longer do it with their whole heart, which is the thing in Ruskin, or it's in Christopher Alexander. It's like a kind of old saw that sort of comes up again and again. People become tainted by self-consciousness. And then from then on, their art is kind of shallow. And Plečnik somehow he manages to like thread the eye of the needle there, where like his stuff is both like super self-conscious and also like super earnest in a funny way, and it's like the kind of performativity of what it's doing. I think
that's only really true for Christopher Alexander and Ruskin. Like the stuff that Ruskin actually did and the stuff that Christopher Alexander did suffer from that massively. They suffer from their own anxieties about it. But I don't think that's generally true.
Yeah, but it's like
you can be neurotic.
Yeah.
Anyway, Plečnik's not neurotic in that way at all. He's completely confident in the marks he's making.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's sort of borne along on his like,
but not because he
self-belief.
Doesn't do like. There's a strange thing in the design process where he'll do like 6 designs that are completely different.
Yeah.
It's not kind of his design process is This I think is generally a good thing.
Yeah.
He will just design absolutely tons of stuff, and I think part of the confidence is just that he doesn't think twice when he's doing it, and then he examines what he likes about them.
Yeah.
But he's just churning out different ideas that are all quite different. And like most of the people we talked about, he uses the same motifs again and again and again.
Column in the middle,
this funny bridge, balustrade, really wide, strange proportions.
Yeah.
It's also amazing that he managed to persuade people to build this stuff.
I really like the column in the middle of this. This is the kind of the main chapel in the Žale. What is it about it? It's got like this one really too big column.
Yeah.
In the middle of...
and if I remember rightly, to go in, you have to go into a weird, uncomfortable space right behind the column.
Yeah.
And behind that, there's the door.
Yeah.
And there's not enough...
But the column feels like the big menacing statue of Athena or Zeus that you get like crammed inside the Greek temple.
Yes, it's too big.
It's too big, and it's so powerful, and it's kind of... And in this case, it's also rather sort of poignantly like peering over the top of this little pergola that's been set up in front of it. It's such a funny juxtaposition, but it really...
It's all architecture, sculpture.
It really works. It's so... There is a level of grotesque kind of effect in what he's doing. And I guess some of it's also sort of poignant or whatever. Look at all the little columns. Got these little thin one with its big eyes. It's
almost like surrealism, isn't it?
It is, yeah. These big thin ones. You've got these kind of solid mid-sized ones with their sort of big swaggy pergola on top, and then you've got this massive fluted Doric one all lit up in the sun peering over the roof. Yeah, they are little characters. There are characters within characters.
They feel, to me, this chapel feels much more like an artwork.
Yes.
More than it feels like it is a thing, more than it feels like it's a building. And the churches are quite like that as well. I go around Victorian churches in London, and they can be quite fun or not. But they all feel very much like they're mostly a church. And these things some of them are like mostly a massive power monument. And some are more churchy than others.
But they also, they're just sort of evoking... I think partly it's like a lack of cultural context, but I think also they all are just sort of the architecture that they evoke, or the kind of time and place that they evoke, is just sort of radically elsewhere from what they actually are. Like that Belgrade church, these sort of big, massive brick, the sort of like dark, lit from high up. It feels very like a kind of mid-century sort of brutalist, like civic monument or something like that. Doesn't feel like it belongs to a kind of historicist era, or the folk art ski lodge kind of feeling that you get in St. Michael's. It's I don't know, he's sort of operating in a different kind of imaginative space or something.
Yeah, I mean, I might also be completely wrong. Obviously, I haven't been to any services in any of them, so I don't really know how they feel.
They operate.
You have, when you're a tourist going around churches, you always have this experience of them as slightly sort of abstract things, because they're not, because you're just not using them in that way. The complex at the cemetery is definitely strange and not what it seems to be. Yeah,
mortuary theme park.
Mortuary something like that, because they're things that look like something that they're not. Shrines to martyrs, family tombs.
Yeah,
but there aren't the martyrs there. They're not family tombs. I mean, he's very good. His churches are better than most people's churches, definitely, and certainly very powerful. They're very Plečniky.
Who is comparable? I was thinking maybe it's like some of the people working in Italy at the same time. People like some of the kind of urban, sort of strange historicist kind of neo-Baroque.
Oh, like Rossini.
Yeah. Plečnik never really got to build his mega-scale religious commissions, but he did design some. I think we'll talk about them a bit in the bonus. There are a couple of like skyscraper monastery proposals preserved in relatively... There are some drawings of them floating around. I think we'll probably have to
figure out what they
project a little bit about what they're about.
Sometimes I think he doesn't. It's not the right way of focusing. We should focus on the good thing. But sometimes I think it doesn't hold together.
Yeah.
Sometimes he does put things out there, build them, which are just bad.
Mm.
I think the sides... Bits of the facades of the big... Is it St. Anthony? The church which has got the cubic interior.
That's St. Francis.
St. Francis. Bits of the facade of that is just not very good.
Mm.
I think it's genuinely...
A bit undercooked.
Yeah, like for someone who turned out so many ideas, why did he do that?
Yeah. The relationship to the context is not convincing.
Yeah.
It's very much an interior world.
That's
church.
not the only one. He's not uniformly good quality. He doesn't.
Yeah.
He's like not someone who just doesn't put a foot wrong. I mean, that's a hell of a thing to expect for someone, especially someone who's churning out quite a lot of work quite quickly.
Yeah.
And he is like nearly all this stuff is built in 15 years.
Yeah. Basically 1925 to 40.
Yeah.
He just does hundreds of projects without seemingly having had much of a infrastructure. I think there's something to figure out there about how it all got done, really.
He doesn't seem to go to the places very much either.
Yeah.
I guess it's like Le Corbusier with La Touré. Like he went there twice.
Yeah. Had
She
an
stopped
idea.
for a day.
Had an idea. Yeah, basically.
Dash something off.
Yeah.
Didn't go there at all for the construction.
Yeah. This project is the natural point of pivot. The city of the dead, and we're going to go into the city of the living next.
Ljubljana at the period was very fortunate in having ended up with this guy do its. Because if you're building a city, you kind of always are imagining. I mean, obviously, it's a city that's been there for a very long time. It's a Roman city, but as a capital, it's definitely a new creation, and he's given it a real identity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening.
Yes, thank you very much. This might, I hope we're not driving everyone away with this.
Yes. We'll do a little bonus, I think, about some additional churches and some other curiosities. And
I think it'd be nice to do the bonus of all the things we could think of that he's referencing.
Oh, yeah, we could throw some of that in as well. Yes, in the main episodes, we will turn next to the civic projects, and we'll kind of talk through the grand narrative of Plečnik in Ljubljana, all of the things he built and all of the things he wanted to build and didn't quite get round to, which are, well, they're both quite interesting stories. If you've just kind of ended up listening to this podcast and you don't know who we are or what's going on, our website is aboutbuildingsandcities.org. You can find links to all sorts of things that you might want to access there. Thank you very much to Matt Lloyd Roberts for editing the show. I think that's everything.
All right,
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye-bye.